What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Layback Podcast. Joining us today is Doctor of Physical Therapy, Josh Davis. He is the owner, operator, founder of TriStar Strength and Rehab. Also worth mentioning, strength coach too, with the DPT behind his name. The strength coach probably gets buried pretty often, although I do know that is something very important to him in the structure of what they do with TriStar. I know we'll tackle that as we get going in this conversation. So maybe I just put that little teaser out in front of everyone, just moving beyond solely rehab and not just bridging the gap into performance, but actually getting athletes performing better than they ever were before. That isn't my words, that is straight off their website. So you can go check that out yourself. I definitely did some reading ahead of time to try to prep for this. Josh is proud of me for the research. With this, though, I'm going to kick it over to him before I butcher anything else in this intro. Josh, thanks for coming on and really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Just, I guess, as a quick intro. So, again, physical therapist, graduated from East Tennessee State University. So, if you can't tell by the country accent that's coming out of my mouth, I'm from East Tennessee. So, but yeah, I did my undergrad there, exercise science, and then PT school there as well. And always wanted to be a physical therapist kind of thing, like former athlete, baseball player. Like about 90% of physical therapists got injured, found PT, and was like, I can make a living doing this. But yeah, I mean, a big thing as far as like history goes is like I was in PT school and just kind of realizing that there's a lot of gaps in PT school. If that's another rant for another podcast, they just prepare you for the boards and to be a generalist. And I knew I wanted to work with athletes, but was just unsure of how to get from idea to reality. So during my clinical rotations, my goal was to get out of East Tennessee and just see how like PT is practiced across the country. And that was unlike a lot of my other classmates. They all wanted to stay close and go to benchmark or whatever, kind of outpatient ortho meal clinics. No shade, but kind of shade. That was just not what I didn't want to see three or four people at a time. Like I wanted our one-on-one and provide the best possible care that I can. So anyway, I did a rotation in Provo, Utah for like 3 weeks. That was my first clinical rotation where I was doing a presentation, and one of the big poly former BYU guys paused during my intro, raised his hand and said, "Can we get a teleprompter for this kid?" Looked at my CI and I was like, "Where do I go from here?"
That would have
So,
thrown me
oh,
for a loop. Oh my
dude.
gosh. I would have been so scared from that moment
Oh,
on.
it was bad. Like you could hear like my voice shaking and everything. It was so awful. But anyway, got through it. Great experience. And then one of my last rotations was at Spooner Physical Therapy in Scottsdale, and they do the one-on-one patient care model. And they did some cash-based stuff, which is completely new to my area, like my neck of the woods, to sound even more redneck. But yeah, it was just something where I just seen the care they could provide that was just different than the meal clinic. And they weren't very strength conditioning based, which was interesting because that was kind of what I brought to the table for them. So like after I left, they got some rogue squat racks and trap bars, which was pretty cool. And I still keep tabs with them, kind of just checking in with them, see how they're doing. But yeah, that was kind of my clinical rotations. And again, I just seen a gap in our PT curriculum to where we were like one class of therapeutic exercise, 3 sets of 10, yellow TheraBand, freaking external rotation for all baseball players. And that was like the all we did. So I was like, I need to expand. And I was a personal trainer all through undergrad anyway. So I had that experience anyway. So I went ahead and got my CSCS in my third year during one of our breaks, and best thing I've ever done, honestly, because that kind of got me into what I do now with TriStar, and we've got a couple other clinicians on board. But the goal is to, like, kind of what you said. You've always heard that term, bridge the gap. The way that I view it is like a straight line continuum, and you've got rehab, and then you've got like pro level athlete, right? And if we start here, we're injured. I mean, like we can still get on that continuum. It just comes down to load, intensity, volume, exercise selection. And then with youth athletes, it's all about like load management. They've got friggin' showcase here, they've got showcase here, they're doing pull downs this day. That's been something that I have found interesting managing. And then they've got their strength coach at school. who may or may not have experience with strength and conditioning,
Right, just
So
4 years of high school football and 1 year at the local D3.
yeah, and they're probably jacked. I mean, let's be honest.
Right, right.
But yeah, I mean, to counteract that, we went really heavy with like sports science tech. So we started with the Vold Force Decks and the Dynamo. Gosh, we've had those for like 4 years now. So we do like force profiling and then obviously just movement-based analysis. But every person that comes through the door, whether they're a 11-year-old baseball player, pro guy, or our 70-year-old longevity clients, like they all get force plate like profiling along with range of motion, all the typical PT stuff. But yeah, whenever you walk in our facility, it doesn't look like a PT clinic at all. And that was my goal, as you can see with Step Brothers up behind me. We don't take ourselves too seriously here, but it's about training like we treat and treat like we train. That's kind of the key there. But then I got hooked up with you and dude, we got the device in and now we're just testing like madmen, dude. So it's been awesome. It's definitely a learning curve. PT school, I didn't expect to be doing this much forearm work as far as treatment goes, but it's been solid, especially bouncing out ideas off of you. That's been great. So yeah, man, that's kind of where we're at.
Excellent. I appreciate you running through all that. Definitely had to shout out Dale and the crew over your right shoulder, or I guess I should
So
say
bad.
Dragon and Nighthawk, their formal names. And I did see one of the times you turned, I saw FlexPro Grip basically right through your right shoulder. There it is. Love the
Product
product
placement,
placement
dog.
there. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about the learning curve for sure that you've gone through. Although there's one particular piece from that whole intro that I want to go back to, and you said it's probably a conversation for another podcast. Although I want to say you are wrong, and I actually think that's perfect for what we're talking about
Do it.
here. You
Yeah.
talked about the kind of the nature of your curriculum in PT school, and I even think that goes well beyond PT school, and we can apply that to the sports science sector as a whole, sports medicine even. So much of what I see being done from a research perspective, from an application perspective, is about stating what is happening, but now to use the phrase that we've already kind of talked about a few times, that doesn't bridge the gap into actual application. We constantly assess on a force plate. Great. What's that mean? We do a biomechanical analysis. Awesome. What's that mean? And I don't know if that's where you felt the gap was in PT school, but certainly from my side, that's what I've seen. Now there's so much information, but the biggest gap that I see is the ability to tell that story from the information. So I don't know if that's what you were experiencing when you were going through PT school, just being told, like, hey, this is what's going on, but not really being instructed or guided on how to actually do something about it. I don't want to speak on your experiences here, but I just kind of wanted to call out what I see and give you the floor to take this away.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're exactly right. I mean, I think I would even go a step back. Like we didn't even talk force plates or anything like that in PT school, but I mean, even from like a differential diagnosis, like I mean, we were quizzed like crazy on differential diagnosis. And to be honest, like anymore, like if it's a shoulder, I could give a crap less about what the MRI says. I'm going to treat what's in front of me and what movement deficiencies they have, where their subjective pain is, and then just build the program around that. Like, I think that was more of the discrepancy in PT school is like there was no there like we never heard the word programming, which is absurd to me because that's literally what we do. Traditional PT, you're going to get like 2 or 3 sessions a week, and like PT's already got 2 people there. You're going to hop on the bike for 15, soft tissue for 15, and then they're going to be like, here's your sheet of paper with stick figures. Go knock this out. Holler at me when you're done. Well, at that point, like the obvious thing is like, what if they're doing terrible form, or what if they have questions? I mean, it's like it's just basic stuff, but I mean, it comes down to again, like I use the word meal because that's kind of what it is. Whenever somebody's in here with us, it's like, we want to make sure that they're moving efficiently, or the exercise is not the exercise for them, right? Because I may have like the most dialed program. I'm stoked about it. I'm texting you about it, like, dude, this guy's gonna crush. And then they get in here and they can't dissociate their shoulders from their hips. Well, then it's like, okay, well, then that's not the best exercise for them, no matter how much research I see that says that this needs to be done, or I see Skeens doing something. That doesn't mean that it's good for Buddy over here who's got whatever going on. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was almost the critical thinking side. They were all about rep ranges that are pretty outdated, It'd be like sets of 30 on stuff, which is doable in some cases, but it's like, no, we need to load this. Like, prone eyes wise tees, it was like pink dumbbells. And it's like, no, it's no different than any other joint or muscle in the body. Like, we need to load it up. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's several layers to that question. In short, it wasn't enough, is basically what I would say. And like, you're talking about the force plate stuff now. I mean, that's all you see on Instagram now, whether it's Exos or whatever, insert well-known sports med clinic. They've got all the stuff. They've got the Kaisers. They've got all this stuff. But if you see the data and you can't communicate what it means to them, like we've started doing VBT stuff and we've got the Voltra, Beyond Power Voltra just come in last week and it is killer. No, no plug. Not sponsored, but I'd like to be. But like, just seeing these outputs, I'm trying to reach out to like Coach Cam at Cincy. I've been reaching out to him a lot and talking about some swing metrics that we can look at. But like again, I can tell them a number and feel like, all right, is that good? It's like, well, if you don't know, then why are you even doing the dang test? Sorry, I was gonna cuss, but I didn't know.
No, it's okay. That's
Okay,
clean. You say
okay.
whatever you want. I forgot to cover that on the front end here. Usually what I tell people is I don't care what you say, just remember at the end of the day you're representing yourself. So whatever however you feel you want to talk, you can talk.
Dang, for my wife's sake, she would jump
Okay, okay.
like your son's gonna hear this. So anyway,
Yeah, he's not going to remember it.
exactly, exactly. See, now that's a battle. I don't know if I'm gonna win though, but it's worth trying.
Now, this is brief pause for probably one of the two best things I've heard for dad advice so far, which is try to integrate your kid into your life as opposed to make your life center around their life. So that to me is the perfect example. Why would I change the way I talk just because my kid is around? They're going to hear these things eventually. It's probably better they hear it from me than hear
100%.
it from somebody else.
See, dude, chess, love it.
Chestnut checkers. That's right. And then I'm going to keep the other piece of advice in my pocket when I need to bust that out if we hit a dead air period. But I want to go back now. Now we'll bring this back to the actual point of the podcast. I've just been dad brain with everything, and I'm concerned this podcast might shift that direction. I promise everyone it's not going to. You just might hear a little bit more about it here and there, especially when I'm talking to other dads on the podcast. But how did you get to the point of actually being able to tell the stories with the data? Was that just from trial and error, communication over time, figuring out what works? Really, what was it? Because you have so much at your disposal information wise. You mentioned VALD and everything that goes with VALD. You're doing force profiling for every athlete that comes in. And as you said, not just athletes, but the 70-year-old wellness patient that's coming in and doing FlexPro Grip, doing VBT. It's a ton of data, but where does the story actually come from for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with the assessment, honestly, like just laying out like what we do and kind of prefacing to the person in front of me that like this is going to be like getting hit with a fire hose of information. If you need me to stop, hit the brakes because I can talk about this stuff all day. And I'm good at like, again, I'm trying to think of a better phrase than dumb it down, but like that's kind of what it is, like
Meet
distill it a
people where
little
they
bit.
are.
Yeah, yeah. So like again, they could care less about the actual number. They just want to know if it's good or bad and what they need to work on. So that to answer your question, I think that was more of my learning curve of
Hmm.
like, okay, how can I, explain this to an 11-year-old and they can tell their parents. Like this is what I tested. I don't have a lot of twitch. I'm not quick off the ground. Here's how that makes me better on the field. And if I can explain that, we're good. Because then on the programming side, that takes pressure off me. It's like, all right, this is all it is. Really, when you get down to these metrics, it's a bunch of bigger words. And if you just know the general meaning of like what output you're chasing, and then what input being training you're trying to improve that output. I mean, that's what it's about. Like I've had several students here lately. I actually had one last week that she was talking about this very thing. Like I feel like I've got this gap between the diagnosis and what I see in front of me, but I don't know what intervention to use. And she's a third year, so she's in her last year. And again, this is not like saying anything bad about her because she's just not armed with the information. And that's where I told her, I was like, you need to get your CSCS or at least just like follow these certain people on Instagram, like before you do that. And I think that's where social media, you're talking about the information, it's a lot, but if you can distill it into trusted sources like Cressy, like Ronald, like the guys at Next Era, like, that kind of thing, you've got a good start. Obviously, try to educate yourself. Like I've got the Movement Over Max's book above my shoulder there. Like things like that and podcasts like what you're doing. That's where you can at least get introduced to it, and then from there it's apply. And the best person to apply it to is yourself. I'm not throwing anymore, at least not yet. I'm soft tossing a little man, but like, I mean, that's something like I would love to be able to get velo up and stay healthy because I'm 32, almost 33. So if any program I put in front of an athlete or a client, like I've done it. So I think having all this force plate data, like I've tracked my metrics for 4 years and I've done X program to try to improve it. So yes, everybody's different, but at least we can distill like, do they need contrast therapy? Do they need, or not therapy, but training? Do they need more soft tissue work? Do they need joint, range? Like, you just got to look and see where they're at and then find a way to distill that down to where they are. And I think that's the key.
You mentioned something specific in that answer. I don't know if this was even that important to you in the phrasing of it, but it stuck out to me. You mentioned the 11-year-old coming in to see you and being able to explain to their parents how it's going to help them be better on the field.
Mhm.
And this goes back to what you were saying about kind of that continuum of rehab to performance. You are in a position with being a cash pay clinic where you can be a little more mindful of what an athlete needs versus what a sheet of paper or an insurance, whatever company says a patient needs just to check the boxes. So, how did you, I guess, form the mindset or come to these conclusions of caring for an athlete and what is going to help them be the best athlete beyond just treating the injury specific to them? Because I'm sure that goes back to what you experienced in PT school. We have an
Mhm.
injury, treat the injury. Your job
It's
is done. As opposed to understanding that you don't treat injuries in your profession. You treat people who
yes.
happen to have an injury.
Percent. That dude, I couldn't have said it any better. And like that's the thing is like and I didn't go over this as far as like my prior like work, I guess history, but like I worked travel right out of PT school as soon as COVID happened. That was a blast. That's when I graduated. It was 2020. So but yeah, I mean like I've been in the mill clinics, I've been in nursing homes, I've been in, skilled facilities, all the above. And that was something that I would see is like they send you diagnosis codes. If that treatment doesn't fall within that diagnosis code, then you're not getting paid for it. Like they're not going to deem it medically necessary, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because like a lot of the insurance companies, they don't have the medical background. They work with insurance. Who's to say that getting their FDP strength, you know what I mean, like up is like that's clearly going to help them. We know that, but they may see this like piece of tech and they're like, we've never seen this before. That's not needed. There's other treatments that have worked for the past 20 years, but then they don't realize that the game is evolving. The players are getting bigger, faster, stronger. The tech is getting just as impressive. I mean, you've got to treat the person. And that's where, like, whenever we do programs, each person gets an individualized program when they're not in here. Because I'm not gonna lie, like it's cash based, we are more of a high ticket product and service, but like I'm gonna do everything I can to get that person where they need to go, where they want to go. And if they're injured, and honestly, like half of my caseload is uninjured athletes. They're just chasing performance. And to be honest, that's kind of what I dig. Like, I mean, I don't mind doing physical therapy, but I'm more of a strength coach than I am a PT as far as where my passion lies. But having both of those, and I hate kind of using the word hats because I just, in my mind, it's the same. You know what I mean? It's like same hat. I just kind of go different paths. But it's just a matter of what they need, what they want subjectively, which is a huge part of that. Setting smart goals, like is it achievable? What's our timeline look like? It's one of those things you can overcomplicate the crap out of it, but like you just got to listen to what they want. And that's something where in the meal clinics, you get maybe 15 minutes to talk with them. If you have to go to a doc, it's even less, or a surgeon. So it's like they never feel heard, if that makes sense. So with their assessments, dude, like they're an hour long, we're talking for 30, like at least. And even before that, we've already had a call on the phone to see if we're a good fit. And if they're not a fit, I'm not gonna, have them come in. I'll refer them to somebody that fits them the best. But yeah, I mean that's something that you've got to be able to meet people where they are and just talk to people. Like I had so many classmates that, dude, they were smashing tests. They write the brachial plexus in like 2 seconds, but then they can't talk to me. You know what I mean? And here I am making Step Brothers references in the middle of a exam or something. I think that's a superpower that everybody, and I don't care if you're a PT, strength coach, pitching, hitting coach, whatever it is, but you got to be able to relate to whoever's in front of you. And I'm not saying you got to say bet all the time. Like that's a learning curve for me. It's like an old man, but like you don't have to speak the lingo, but at least know the sport. So I think that's a big thing is just talking to him as a person.
I'm going to call on a meeting I actually had over the weekend with an individual, young coach, up and coming, wanted to talk about learning more, learn about FlexPro Grip, but then just how he could learn more about writing programs and coaching athletes. Really, his focus is human biomechanics, true locomotion, not just hip shoulder separation and timing of the arm spiral and things like that, but he wants to learn the true science of human locomotion. And he asked me what books or texts or things I recommend. And I could sit there and call back on whatever book is near me. I obviously you have movement over maxes over your shoulder. There's so many good ones, whether you want to go down the path of the spinal engine theory or hacking the kinetic chain or all these different things, or the textbooks for that matter, beyond just these more like coach written novels. I don't want to call them novels, that's poor phrasing on my end, but more, I guess, performance driven rather than true science driven. I don't know. Maybe I'm digging myself a hole here with this explanation. But what I told him is I can't recommend a single specific book to you because what you read and what matters most to you at the end of the day doesn't matter all that much because what you are going to be faced with is an athlete that has some sort of bias or they're passionate about something, one specific frame of mind. And if you can't coach that or speak that language, you're lost. It doesn't matter if you know every single piece of a kinematic sequence if this athlete does not understand that language whatsoever. Or if you're meeting with a guy who only works in the driveline language and you're trying to preach motor preferences, you're probably screwed. If you have a guy that comes in and only speaks driveline language and you only know spinal engine theory, you're screwed. That's going to be a problem. So my big recommendation is learn it all, but all of it's good and all of it's shit. It's just
100.
how do you meet the person and understand their language? So
Yeah.
I feel like everything that you have gone through is kind of boiling down to that piece. And it almost sounds like that's what the strength side of your background has brought you. PT school brought all the science for you, but pursuing the CSCS beyond just having the certification, but
Mhm.
truly becoming passionate about strength and performance is what enabled you to look at everything more as an entire system as
Mhm.
opposed to an acute event.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, dude, I couldn't have said any better. I mean, that's again, you can have all the information in the world, insert whatever, preference that you have or they have, but like if you can't communicate it, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's reps and sets, truly. I mean, volume, intensity, like it's all those things. There's a line to where do they need to know this information? Like, do they need to know I don't know, like what external internal ratio that they're at, or they just need to know what they need to work on. And that's kind of where I go back to, like, the 11-year-old athlete. Typically after these assessments, I'll plug in like a evaluation or assessment review, and I'll go over the numbers and where I want them to be, but then I just put it in plain language, like if this number is low, this is an issue. I always use the flag system, which you all use in the app too. Is like people know when they see red, they're like, oh shit. They're like, that's not right. And I'm like, dude, like it's pretty accurate, and I'm not talking about just with FlexPro, but like with anything, like, with the force plates, if they start seeing their numbers going down, then I'm like, how much sleep you been getting? Did your girlfriend dump you? Like class load heavy right now? Like, what's up, man? Like you look like trash. And they're like, well, I just didn't get the number that you wanted me to get. And I'm like, dude, it's fine. Like it is okay. We just need to look at your, training load. Are you throwing too much? Like, and that's something I've really enjoyed with FlexPro is like I've got a kid committed to Virginia Tech, and he's playing golf right now. He's not throwing at all. And his numbers, he's been coming in 3 times a week, doing the protocol you sent me. He just pops in. He already knows how to set it up, where it knocks it out. And he tested Friday, and he was running it while I was with somebody else. And he come in, and his expected velo, he wanted 92, and it scored 95. Like, dude, absolutely crushed it. And he was like, man, I really want to throw. And I was like, I know you do, but finish off season, like, we're fine. But then the flip side, I've got a kid he's trying to get a scholarship right now. So he's going to showcase every weekend. He's doing 4 or 5 pins a week. And he's like, man, I am dead. Like, he comes in dragging ass, like, 2 or 3 C4s in his hand. I'm like, bro, you need to stop throwing. So that's where I have a conversation with him, like either stop, pause throwing for a bit, at least ramp it down, and we're going to adjust your volume in here. Like you might need more just straight up recovery work and just mobility flows. Just try to bring the strain down, because like strain is strain and stress is stress, whether it's at the end of a bar or in between your ears. You got to manage it, and it all is going to affect your nervous system no matter what. I mean, the brain's not going to be like, ah, dude, that was a heavy set of 3 on deads, or girlfriend dumped me. I got 4 exams tomorrow and I've slept 2 hours. You're going to be smoked either way. So that's where, again, like we've been harping on this whole time, freaking talk to him, dude. Be like, what's going on? And if we were in a meal clinic, we wouldn't have time to do that.
Yeah, if it's not on the sheet of paper in that scenario, you're never going to cover it.
It's not medically necessary, bro. Talk about
I
their relationships.
Right. One funny tidbit that I have, I broke my L4 and L5 back in high school. So I had to do a significant amount of PT for the whole back thing. But I remember I had the strangest conversation with my physical therapist then, and that was when I realized the system didn't make sense. And this is as an 18-year-old senior in high school. I was spending like an hour and a half in the clinic every day, which, as you said, you're not supposed to do in insurance-based PT. You're
Mhm.
scheduled out for very set time frames. And one day they came up to me and they were like, "What's taking you so long on these exercises?" My response was, "You gave me 3 sets of 30 reps. That is a lot of reps. And I have to do that on both my left and right side. That takes a long time." And they're like, "Well, nobody ever does all 30 reps." Well, then why are you programming the 30 reps? And I had that discussion with the PT, and that was the moment that I realized none of this makes sense. Like you
No,
you don't even know what I'm doing. So you're
no.
telling me that nobody before me has ever done this amount of reps for you to realize that if you do every rep, that you are going to be in here for an hour and a half and not the 45 minutes that you had me scheduled for? So
Dude,
strange.
no, and it's a perfect story because, like, I mean, and it boils down to like, did the PT, did they, and it sounds stupid and like broy, but do they even lift? Like,
Right. No, that's perfect. Like that person, as you said, they had never done the programming for themselves to really understand what the athlete is going through. And it's so strange to me that disconnect happens so often in the performance world, sports science world. People will make recommendations without ever having done it themselves.
Yeah.
although it is okay to be a do as I say, not as I do industry, maybe at least transform it to do as I say as well as what I've tried.
Yes.
I don't need my coach to have thrown 98 miles per hour, but I would love if my coach has at least thrown a baseball in the past year.
For sure.
Or I would love if my PT has at least gotten under a bar sometime in the past year. Those
Hmm.
things are probably important just so they understand the physical experience as well as the mental experience, not just what is expected based on a sheet of paper.
100%. Well, I mean, and on top of that, I don't know if you've talked to Padula. I'm blanking on his first name. He's at Oklahoma, but he's their I believe softball
Mm.
S&C. I ran one of his programs recently because I'm trying to dunk. I'm like 5'8", and I got some decent. Like it's just my goal. Like I bet a couple of my kids that I'm gonna dunk by my birthday in November, which is coming up. My point with that being is like he's got a Badger protocol is what it's called. So it's like split squats with a 5 second ISO, 5 reps, 5 second ISO, and 1 and 5. And if you've never done that with that heavy of a load on a safety squat bar, you don't know what they're going to feel the next 2 days. So how on earth are you going to tell them how to load it and then let alone what they're going to do the next day? Like, because dude, after I do that, I'm smoked. Now, granted, I'm double their age, but like it's just one of those things where if you've not done it, then why on earth are you having somebody else do it? Let alone somebody that may not have the movement patterns or movement efficiency to do it correctly. So we're in the business of making people better, but like if you go too far, and I guess that kind of doubles back to what we're talking about, what you see on Instagram. If you see something on Instagram, you better try it on yourself first, or you might get somebody hurt and you're a physical therapist. But yeah, I mean, going back to your point, like that's the very issue is that person has probably never done what was on the sheet of paper, or they would have known you were doing it correctly. It should take that long, but they just don't realize it.
Sorry for that little tangent. We again can get back online. I might have over caffeinated myself, which is why I'm just buzzing all over the place at this point. But one of the things that you mentioned off air that I do believe would be kind of a fun conversation, kind of going through your own learning process live with discussing FlexPro Grip, the ability to apply it, utilize it for different individuals. You even mentioned that already, having different scores kick back on guys. One who is unbelievably prepared, at least the forearm musculature is right now, versus another guy who needs to be in a good spot and he's getting data kicking back saying that he's in a rough place. So maybe this is the point where I turn it over to you for you to ask a couple questions. Where do you feel like you have a really good understanding? What maybe before that, like what made you want to bring on FlexPro Grip? But then let's get into where you feel you have a good understanding and where can I help you?
Yeah, no, I think this is great. Like I said, I think this is valuable for not just me, but for anybody else who's thinking about making the jump. But I mean, I guess from the start, like the reason I reached out to you is like Trey Martin, he's in Florida, like nothing but high praises about you specifically. So kudos to you.
Shout out Trey.
Um,
Thanks,
yeah,
Trey.
yeah, yeah. But like, but also just the product and like I've got my first TJ patient in here that I've worked with in this clinic. I've worked with TJ before. Having the ability to go so in depth at this cash-based level has been awesome because like we've got data from unfortunately I didn't get it before because I just didn't have the device yet. But like we've been able to just track this over time, and he comes in here religiously, he's smashing it, and he's a very analytical pitcher is the way that I would describe it. Like he's a coach essentially, so he's always asking questions, and like that's great. And you've done a great job of just providing me with information like our conversations, but also like all the white paper and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's I think how to correlate it to what I'm seeing at the shoulder has been something that I've been able to pick up a little bit, like, external rotation versus internal rotation ratios. Is it range of motion, putting more valgus stress on the elbow, which is causing X data kickback? Stuff like that I've been able to piece together pretty good. I think the big thing that I'm curious is like with the rapid throwers 10, or not throwers 10, good Lord. Rapid
Combining
throwers
exercises at this point.
kicking in. PT school is like, wow.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, like out of the tip of the finger flexion, mid finger, and then ulnar, obviously mid finger is probably the one that we're seeing the most decrease in. I know that when
Yeah.
the one athlete I was referring to, he was like 100% on the other two and like 67 on the other one. And he's like, dude, I feel fine. Like, what's up with this? So I guess kicking it to you, how would you explain that to him?
This I always like to explain as the movement of the state of blissful ignorance into harsh reality. The reason I phrase that or use those fancy words almost like it's some sort of album title or movie is really, I feel like a perfect representation of what's going on. And you know this all too well. That area is unbelievably difficult to train unless you're a rock climber. Unless you have participated in rock climbing at some point in your life, you've probably not targeted your FDP or FDS, or the fingertip and mid finger muscles, efficiently doing anything. Yes, you grip a bar, you do plate squeezes or whatever, but then going back to what you said earlier, the load and intensity is just not there. You're basically doing reps for the sake of doing reps. You might have a bigger, more vascular forearm, but at that point it just looks good. You're not actually training the forearm the way that you need to train it to withstand the forces that throwing places upon it. So an athlete who scores how you explained it or in those percentiles, maybe they're meeting the targets on fingertip and they're meeting the targets in ulnar deviation, but the mid finger is lacking. That's not anybody's fault. It's just the reality of what we have seen as an industry. Those areas are extremely difficult to train. And just because the athlete scores poorly, it doesn't mean that they're going to blow out the next time that they pick up a baseball to throw. All this has provided is a red flag, going back to the flag system you mentioned earlier, where we now know what the low hanging fruit is. We know what to address. So it's just providing information so someone in your seat can make a more informed decision for how we target training. So for that athlete in particular, it's not that we're going to neglect ulnar deviation. We're not going to neglect fingertip or FDP strength, but we might put a little more attention to the FDS. So on our normal ABC training cycles, so fingertip, extension, and then mid finger being the ABC, maybe we double up on those C days. Maybe we hit like an AC, BC kind of cycle for that individual. Now, then we get into the nuance of the program of there's one thing with max strength, which is great. We want that to be in a good place. But ultimately, we're chasing stiffness of the muscle tendon unit. So a more resilient, more fatigue resistant muscle tendon unit, which takes time. The research would say that's going to take about 8 to 12 weeks of training. We can see those maxes jump in less than 4 weeks with a neuromuscular adaptation, which I'm using fancy words now, but for anyone out there that doesn't understand that, that's basically the first time you ever step foot in the weight room and you tried to put whatever 95 pounds total on a bench press and you couldn't get it off your chest. And 4 weeks later, you're repping out 135. It's not that all of a sudden you got unbelievably stronger. You just were now able to recruit the musculature that you previously had. And it's not that that isn't important. That's extremely important. Muscle recruitment matters tremendously, but that is, again, more of a max force production thing. Although in the game of baseball, when we need to produce max force over and over and over and over, about 30 more overs again, at minimum, maybe 90 more overs, and then we're matching what a pitching workload looks like, and then do that 5 days later. That's where we care way more about the endurance aspect of things. And I mean that from a plyometric endurance or ballistic endurance. How often can you repeat max loading or high intensity loading? And with that athlete that you presented, that's what we're going to focus on. To me, like, awesome. We don't need to worry about maxes on two things. He already checked two boxes. We need to focus on endurance for the three things we care about and max force only on one of them. So in the grand scheme of things, he's not in that bad of a place. And then I know I'm getting long-winded here, but if we look across the board, that athlete is not that different from everything we see. If we look at every athlete that we have, the 2,500 plus data points for the 2,500 plus users that we have with FlexPro Grip now, we're going to see athletes fall into about a third, a third, a third. A third are in a good place just from the jump for whatever reason. I couldn't tell you why, but they are in a fine place. Then we have the next third, and those guys are probably a month to 8 weeks away from being in a good place. Then we have the next third, which are probably in a rough place and need to do something about it ASAP, or they are risking injury. I know I just got super long-winded on the podcast I'm interviewing you for, but hopefully that helped you out a little bit.
Yeah, no, it did for sure. Because I mean, like, doubling back to what we talked about, like, as soon as he seen that red, he was like, dude, like, why is this red? Like, I got 100% here, 100% here. And that's where it came down to just be like, man, this is something we can work on. That's all this is saying. And you have great explanations underneath there. We just need to focus on this. And that's something I see a lot with the force plates too, is like, if we're down, we're down. It's okay. But everybody's freaking competitive. I've got leaderboards up in the gym. They want to beat homie they played on the same travel team for years and be able to talk shit. That's what I've liked about the Flex Pro. I feel like it's a little bit more nuanced and like just newer in general. Like my athletes just haven't seen it yet, right? So then they do it and they're like, all right, game time. I'll come in 3 times a week. Let's knock this out. That's something that I've seen is the buy-in with this has just been insane. So long as I can explain again, like we talked about earlier, like why we're doing the damn thing, the rest of it falls into place. And again, like I've had kids come in, they're like, hit a velo PR last week, or X is not hurt in a long time. And like I can attribute, a lot of that to the, Flex Pro just in general, and then the program that comes along with it. And like I said, dude, I'm stoked to dive deeper into this stuff with you and see where this thing goes, man.
Well, I appreciate that tremendously. Now, I guess the question for you on it is what gaps do you think it has filled for you?
I think awareness, first of all. Like, I mean, because again, like I can look at somebody's grip strength with a dynamometer and tell some, or I can look at their counter movement jump and week to week and see if they're going down there and the nervous system fatigue's kicking in. Like this makes it so specific to baseball and softball that like it's made my programming for forearm work and grip so much more dialed. Whereas before it was just like, all right, we're going to do some rollouts. We're going to do or roll ups. We're going to do some barbell curls, supination, pronation, see if you get better kind of thing. But like now we can look at every single joint of every single finger. And I mean, that's insane to me. Like just looking at it now, like how tech has evolved and then what you've built, like, dude, I think it's awesome.
Now, follow up for you, and I have my own bias here, but I understand in clinic it gets a little tough. Of course, we have training associated with FlexPro Grip. It's not just assessment, but I assume some of what you have to do, especially because athletes may only come in somewhere 1 to 3 times a week to work with you have to supplement in some capacity. It's not their only forearm work being performed during a week is on FlexPro Grip. You need to prescribe other things. So have you kind of been able to gauge on your side now what forearm work is resulting in greater outputs on FlexPro Grip? Has it kind of given you that feedback where maybe you thought whatever forearm rollers were the best thing you could prescribe, and now you see if that's where an athlete's spending their time, it might not result in improved
Yeah,
metrics
where it's
on
coming from.
FlexPro?
Yeah. I mean, we're getting there because I mean, I forget how long we've had it now, like a couple 1 or 2 months, something
Yeah,
like
I was
that.
going to say, I think you're probably 8 weeks in at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're getting there. I know, for instance, the guy that's been crushing it has been doing slightly different forearm exercises than the other guy. Now, granted, the throwing volume is night and day, right? So, like, it's hard
Hmm.
to if is the exercise being prescribed, or is that coupled with just the sheer volume and fatigue that the other one's feeling, especially with my UCL guy. Like, I mean, that's something like I've got him on the pronator all the time now, working on ulnar radial deviation, just doing some simple like dead hang type stuff. And granted, he's far enough out to where I'm not worried about the surgical site and healing and everything like that. Range is great, but we're really starting to dial him up. And he had his follow up recently, and it was like, yeah, man, you're about 4 weeks out from throwing. Everything looks great. Keep going. And knock on wood, he's not had pain. He had the ulnar nerve transposition, all that kind of stuff, and he had a traditional UCL, not the internal brace. But I mean, dude, he's cooking. I think the hard part is with forearm training in general, and you didn't ask this, but it kind of goes along with the exercises, is it's not the sexy stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want a girl that you've been looking at in high school, but you're sitting over here and you're just doing, freaking ulnar radial deviation for reps. Trying to communicate again, back to the communication piece of like, this is where you're deficient based off what we've seen, and this is why we're going to work on it. This is how we're going to do it. And then 4 weeks later, 6 weeks later, whatever, we retest, and lo and behold, it's better. If it's not, we just go back to the drawing board and figure out which exercises need to be the best. So that's kind of the phase I'm in to answer your question of like trying this, see how it goes, and everybody's different. We'll end up getting a protocol kind of situation for multiple routes, but
For
maybe
sure.
holler at me in like November or December.
One specific piece that I want to call out what you mentioned, kind of the various athlete situations. The athlete who's not throwing is crushing FlexPro right now. The athlete who is throwing a ton, numbers aren't in the best place. Granted, going in, one might have been stronger than the other. Could be. I guess actually, in fact, that's likely the case based on what you've explained so far and just how long they've been exposed to FlexPro Grip. But that is super important to address that the athlete who isn't throwing can spend more of his training economy crushing his forearm because he doesn't need to be concerned about the fatigue level or readiness level of his forearm versus the guy who is throwing currently. We constantly need to make sure that he is as ready as he will ever be to pick up the ball and go showcase, go throw in front of this scout, whatever. Because at the end of the day, we have to expose the specific area to stress in order to get the adaptation that we need. And unfortunately, if we expose it to stress, we're subjecting it to fatigue. If we subject it to fatigue, we're increasing the risk of injury. Yeah, that's sorry for if anyone was like, whoa, we're increasing injury risk by doing this. In a vacuum, maybe. Like if somebody does any training, if they train before they go play or go do anything at peak outputs, you've increased injury risk. Sorry if this is the medium that was used to break that information to you, but that's just reality. If you are tired whatsoever, and not just physically tired, but acutely tired, like looking at specific musculature, your injury risk is increased. That's it. It's plain and simple. But that is also why we will mess around with our training economy or the attention that we will give certain musculature or certain protocols given where an athlete is in their own recovery schedule, throwing schedule, what have you. And I just felt like I needed to address that based on what you explained. Is that athlete who's showcasing right now, maybe we're focused more on maintenance. Does he need to spend a ton of time training? Yeah, 100%. You said he's weak. That's not good. But also, if we say FlexPro Grip is the single most important thing that this athlete needs to be doing right now, that would be idiotic on my end to preach because FlexPro Grip is great. I'm not going to say it's not. But the reason we have it is so athletes can compete on the field. So if we spend more time on FlexPro Grip and then that athlete can't compete on the field, I'm being a hypocrite. That is exactly what I don't want to be. We want to be supporting athletes in being the best they can be on the field. And FlexPro Grip is a tool for that, not something to prevent you from doing what you love.
And something that goes without saying, like the same kid is one that doesn't have a spectacular strength coach, in my opinion. And they're doing like 5x8 on cleans for their max days. So buddies like this all the time, you know what I mean, with like a hook grip. So I mean he's smoked, grip wise anyway. To your point, like we've just got to manage fatigue as much as we can, no matter the device or input, right? So I guess a question I have for you really quick, and I'll stop asking you questions specifically, but like whenever you've got those two athletes, one gold star, one we need to look at his grades. Are we saying test more frequently for one versus the other? How close of an eye do we need to keep on the testing side of things for the athlete that is just gassed? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And some of it is difficult in the sense of, in order to get the best picture of where an athlete is, we need to understand where they're at from a max force
Right.
output standpoint. The
Mhm.
problem with that is the more you max, the more you're going to fatigue yourself. So I'm not going to say that we don't want to test regularly. I think testing regularly is super important for that individual. But also, if we test and we begin to understand how an outing might impact that individual, maybe we don't need to test quite as often and just ensure that we're doing the things necessary to get them back to baseline, to get them to whatever their current best is until we get to December, when we know that athlete might not be showcasing and we need to get them ready for their baseball season starting in March. So I would say some of that is the classic it depends, but do enough to understand what baseline is.
Where
Once
they
we
are.
understand what baseline is, we can kind of step back from the assessment unless that athlete comes in and says like, yo, I feel fatigued, I might have a problem, let's figure out where we're at. But
Mhm.
once we know where the baseline is, what's the point of continuing to, I guess, figure out what baseline is?
Yeah.
Especially when we know we're not really trying to make major improvements. We're trying to hold steady until we can get to a point where we can dedicate ourselves to further improvement. Versus the athlete that's feeling great right now and has really good numbers, that guy we can kind of look at it either way. Like if we're trying to improve peak performance and that's the goal, we don't need to worry about throwing, test whenever you want, because
Yeah.
that might be what the athlete cares about. Can we get these maxes to go up? And I would be lying if I didn't say that peak outputs are cool to look at. And as you know, it's a great way to get buy-in. Every time you do a jump on the force plate or a mid thigh pull, that's
Yeah.
what an athlete gets excited about, not 5x5 at 70% of a one rep max. Like that gets boring because you don't know what peak force output is.
For
So
sure.
some of it is juggling the engagement factor versus what really matters. But yeah, it depends. Figure out the baseline. Once we figure out the baseline, understand what's most important and put our energy towards that.
It sounds a lot like training. Don't do
Yeah.
your bench press one rep max every freaking week and expect it to go up.
Yeah, so that's how I would boil down that answer for you.
Yeah, awesome.
Now I will take the reins back. Thank you for taking the reins for me on the podcast for a little bit. It was nice to play guest instead of host for a little, but
Yeah.
I'll take it back for one more question or two before we let you go. Now, you did mention the whole youth development piece, sports specialization. Where do you stand on the sports specialization, I guess, paradigm or continuum? Because that certainly is a continuum in itself. So, at risk of putting you on podium for another debate, I want to hear the, I guess, opening and closing statements quickly, and then maybe I'll offer a little candor from my side.
Bro, I'm very much on the early sports specialization is not the best idea. In my opinion, like if you can move in different ways at a younger age, and again, like, let me preface, this is my opinion, right? But like, I forget that there was a study out when I was in Spooner and I was on a podcast for that and I was doing some research for it. So forgive me, I've slept a few times despite my son not sleeping, but since I've read it, but I believe it was like NFL first round draft picks in whatever year it was. It had been like 2020 or before. but like I think it was 86% played multiple sports in high school. Just thinking about that fact. I mean, I played multiple sports. Granted, I'm 5'8", like 160. I wasn't playing freaking linebacker or starting center in my basketball team, but like just being able to move differently and not having those repetitive motions year round. I think that is the big thing. Being in East Tennessee, dude, like it's baseball 365, like 100%. And that's the way most places are. The prevalence of POs right now that I'm talking to in high school is shocking. Pitcher only, and I'm like, bro, you don't hit, like you don't play first at least. Like, come on. Like in my opinion, having a well-rounded, I mean, it's kind of what we talked about earlier, like methodologies. Like, don't be married to one thing, learn everything, distill it down, and then like eventually you're going to get to the level where you're D1 or pro, where you are a pitcher. Like that is your title now. But like in high school, I mean, my gosh, like I don't see how it hurts to play a little, infield and hit a bit.
So I
Uh,
assume to kind of counteract what you're seeing from a specialization perspective, because of course you have your opinion, then there's the reality of what athletes are doing to chase
100%.
down scholarships and all these different things. And I'm not going to be the one to tell them you shouldn't want a scholarship and you shouldn't put your eggs in one basket. But I'm assuming that then goes back to why you program across the board and you're trying to train an athlete to be an athlete as opposed to train a pitcher to be a pitcher.
Correct. Yes. I mean, like we've got phases where it's like a GPP phase, we've got hypertrophy phase. We might not have them rotating that much for a bit after the season. But like thinking back, my D1 guys and gals are all multi-sport athletes in high school. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing. I've also had some that are just straight up studs and they've pitched ever since they were 11, and that's what it is, right? It has to be addressed but not pushed, if that makes sense. Like I've had several athletes, like the one I'm talking about that's going to Virginia Tech. He played basketball. He's like the, high school leading scorer in basketball senior year this year, and he's like, I just don't think I want to play. And I'm like, are you asking me? And he's like, I said, it sounds like you already got your mind made up. And he's like, yeah, what do you think? And I said, buddy, one, if you're not into it, it may not be worth the risk of injury, and you can work on everything else before you go to tech. Then I've got some other kids that are just getting beat up, and they got tournament every weekend, and it's just, I don't know. I think if there were seasons to every training cycle, I think it may be a bit more beneficial.
Too bad seasons don't exist anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. It's 365. And to your point, like that's where I can try to do the best that I can. If they are going to sport specialize, that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But we've got to adjust the training to try to mimic those seasons as much as we can. I'm never going to shut a kid down unless it's medically necessary. Like maybe we ramp it down a bit. Try not to long toss for a couple weeks. Don't do as many pull downs, whatever it is. Maybe throw a little bit less in your pins. But like if they are siloed into that sport specialization realm, which a lot are, that's where you just got to look at all the other factors you can adjust.
I love it. One other question, which isn't really a question. What did we miss, if anything?
Bro, I don't know. I honestly can't think of anything. I feel like we've hit everything.
Great. Well, then I think we did our job here today. Josh, this was awesome to chat with you, I guess actually in a recorded setting. Hopefully, I stayed on task a little bit. Like I said, I might have gone too far on the caffeinated side of things, plus a full night's sleep. And now I feel like I'm going too quickly for the first time. One other ask for you, I suppose. How can people get in touch with you or follow what you're doing?
Yeah, yeah, we're on Instagram at TriStar Strength X Rehab. That's really our most active platform that we have. I mean, we have Facebook, but my mom's on there. That's about it. But yeah, we're actually trying to get into the TikTok game per my athletes. So I've got to download TikTok like an old man. But yeah, Instagram's probably the best place.
Perfect, man. This was awesome. Really appreciate the time today. And to all the listeners out there, thanks for laying back with us.